The next area I want to spend a little bit of time talking about in the scene information bar is the camera control center. And the camera control center is this center area over here in the middle of our scene information bar. So starting at the top, we have the name of the camera that we currently have selected, and right now we have the main camera that is the active camera. So if we go down here and we expand out main camera, we have the main camera, which is bolded, and underneath that is top camera. So if I double click on top camera becomes the selected camera. Alternatively, we can use these arrows to the left and right and cycle through the cameras that we have stored. This area here in the middle is our render preview. This preview displays a real-time thumbnail of your rendered scene. Modifications that you make in these 3D views are immediately previewed here. This render preview only uses one processor core, so when it goes to render this area out, this small thumbnail, it only uses one processor core. This means if you're going to be working with a fairly large scene, and what I mean by large, it has a huge polygon count, a lot of detail, it could take a long time for this area to render out. And this is because it's only using one processor core. So if we right click on this preview area, we can uncheck auto update, and by unchecking auto update we don't have to wait on the computer to update this area. We can manually refresh it as we go. The opposite of that is we want this to render all the time and render fast, and we can select make this a high priority, so it will dedicate processor power towards this preview area and less into the 3D modeling area. Down here we have several controls, and the first one is pan. We've kind of discussed this already a little bit before, but when we press and hold down the left click, the current camera that we have selected will pan. As I'm panning around, you can kind of notice the changes in these other views. So I'm going to select side view and make that the active 3D view, and then I'm going to pan. And you can kind of see what the camera exactly does when you pan. If we look at it in plan view and pan again, we can see how the camera is moving as we pan. And then in front view, so it's basically moving in a coplanar direction. It's either moving in an XY or an XZ or a YZ direction. The controls next to it is zoom, and what this does is, what it really does is just move the camera back and forth. So I'm going to go to top view again and move the camera back and forth, and we perceive this as zooming in and zooming out, and all it's doing is moving the camera front and backwards. I'm going to go back to my main view, move my camera down, and I'm going to play with the forwards and backwards here just to see what that looks like. So by using these three views and playing with these controls, you can see exactly what these controls do. The next one is rotate camera, so we're just looking left and right, and if we look at the plan view of that, we can see exactly what it's doing. So you can see that it's just rotating the camera left and right or up and down. To see the up and down, we use one of the side views. It's just looking up and down. The next button over is rotate around a selected object. So I'm going to select the papyrus, and then if we, in this main camera, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit, and then I'm going to rotate around the selected object. So I'm going to go to plan view and rotate around the selected object, and you can see the camera in the plan view and how it rotates around that selected object. The next one has to do with camera focal, and what this is really the lens of your camera. So I'm going to go back to side view, and as I use the focal, you'll notice that the camera is not really moving, but the lens is zooming in you can see from these lines here that it's focusing on a particular area of your plant, and then the other way is zoom out. I'm going to click off the plant and click on the main camera. I'm going to do that again. And then the last button over here to the right is the Save Camera button. So let's just say that we really like this position and we want to be able to come back to this position again. We can click the Save button, and over here in our Layers list it creates a camera called Camera 1, and we can just click on it a second time to be able to rename the camera. So we'll just say this, we'll just call this Perspective or something, Perspective 1. So you have an assignment, or your client wants a perspective view of this vegetation plan at this particular view. Well, you can create a camera there. You can come back to that camera whenever you want, and then go back to your main camera and start editing. So let's say in our main camera we zoom all the way out and we're looking at something else in the landscape. And then we can go back to Perspective 1, which will take us back to where we were at before, that saved camera position. Back to main camera. Top camera gives us a top-down view. So by default, when you start at view, you always have two cameras. Additional cameras you can create. So that's all there really is to this main camera control center, this camera control center area.